Good evening. Today is Monday, March 3rd. We have a special school committee meeting. We are taped live and rebroadcasted by WMCT-TV. We have one school committee member that is not with us, who is remote, so any votes will be roll call. I call this meeting to order at 6:42. We apologize for the delay, and so let's just jump in. So we are conducting interviews for superintendent today. So we will have the first candidate come out. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Before they come out, do we want to discuss the formatting for how we're going to ask the questions tonight?
We sure can. Go
Does
for
anybody
it.
have a suggestion? So are we just going to go around the table and ask a question? Does somebody want to go first, or how do you want to handle it?
We can start going around, jump in, like. So. Yeah, I mean, we could just.
First, if no one cares.
Sure.
Perfect. Michelle will go first, and then.
Do we want to have them do an introduction
Yes.
of that first, and then Michelle can start?
What, Heidi, what did you say?
That
So
they do an introduction
Yeah,
of themselves to the community.
please, yes.
Right.
I would appreciate that.
Great.
So the candidate will come in, we'll ask them a little bit about themselves, a little introduction, and then Michelle, you can ask the first question, and then we'll take it from there.
I think we want them to do an introduction for those who are watching at home and maybe weren't at the forum earlier.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Sound good, everyone?
Sounds good. Perfect.
Great. Alrighty, we are just waiting for the candidate to come in, so bear with us.
And at the, Michelle will ask the first question, and then do you want us to just acknowledge that we'd like to ask a question, and you'll point and go from there? Or are we just gonna round table it?
I'm okay with roundtabling,
I would say
yes,
go
yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Or are you prepared to go next, or you want it to come this way? Okay, good.
Hello, sir. Want to have a seat? So if you press the button in the center, the green light should populate, and that's when you know that your mic is on.
Okay, I think it is on. We have a green light.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Alrighty, so this is Mr. David Jungberg, and if you'd just like to tell us a little bit about yourself and a little introductory
Yes.
for the people at home that are watching. So we are
Absolutely.
taped live, and there are people watching at home, just so you know. So there's cameras, so make sure you smile and
Very good.
And then
which is the better side here?
that only you can answer that. I don't know. Yeah.
So thank you for having
you
me.
have the floor.
I've had a really terrific day. It's been so much fun. First, I should introduce myself. My name is Dave Jungberg, candidate for the superintendent position. First, I'm just thrilled to be here, and I want to thank the committee and the community members who've been part of this process. I know that this group in particular has spent a lot of hours, preparing and going through interview processes and vetting candidates. So I want to thank you all for that. I have, what has led me here is I'm really excited about the Marlborough Public Schools because it offers a new experience for me to share my skill set. I was a trained educator in an urban setting, and I started my career as a student teacher in the Worcester Public Schools, and then taught out in Seattle, Washington in a urban setting, and then came back and did some service teaching while I was earning my graduate degree at Providence College. And since then I've held various roles in teaching, from third grade, self-contained, all the way through middle school, where I was a humanities teacher, both in a middle school setting. I taught social studies and ELA, and then also I taught grades 5 and 6 self-contained, so I've seen both models and how those work. I explained earlier today that I was also trained as a literacy specialist, and that was probably one of the most fun jobs that I had, because I get to work with both students directly and with staff in supporting their roles. And throughout my career, each role that I've had very strong mentors that encourage me along the way to take steps into further educational leadership. And I am really all about instructional leadership, and I really take a team approach with being able to lead. It's a huge responsibility, but it's also a great privilege, and this is a really important process and a really important decision for the Marlborough Public Schools. So I appreciate just having the opportunity to be here. So thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So obviously we all have our name plates in front of us. So Michelle is actually in the TV, so she usually sits here. So if you need to
all
refer
right.
to her, that is who is the individual on the TV.
And
Just
I
so
met Michelle a few moments ago, so.
perfect. Just so everyone's on the same
First
page.
question.
So yes, so Michelle, please.
Okay, so I'm interested in why you are interested in Marlboro. Like, what specifically about our district do you think that some of the skill sets that you were just describing, how do you think that it's a good fit for Marlboro?
So Marlboro is facing a tremendous amount of challenges right now, but you're also seeing a lot of really strong, successful things happening in the realm of curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And I don't think that that's talked about a lot or enough. And one of the things that I'd like to do is really shine a spotlight on the good things that are happening here. I feel ready for the challenge to take on some of the things that you are facing right now with increased enrollment. I know that the schools are facing serious challenges with space. I have experience working with that, both in my current and former districts. We're going through those processes, including looking at demographic studies and potential for redistricting, and I'm very familiar with that process. What makes me tick is really supporting students on all kinds of issues, whether it is learning, ELL, English language learners, special education, and stretching that all the way to our learners that need more to keep them interested and to keep the academics rigorous for them. I know that from what I've heard throughout my visits is that you're also facing competition with surrounding school districts and trying to keep students within district. That's something that I'm also working on currently right now as a challenge with the Stoneham Public Schools. And having the capacity to be able to serve in this position, I feel like I can bring that experience to the table and really work with your teams that are doing such great things. Throughout all of my interactions, one of the through lines and one of the common themes is the dedication that folks have for the schools. And I was really awestruck by the number of folks that have been here for a very long time, including members of the school committee, and that amount of longevity and the dedication and the commitment and that stability helps things move along in a school district. And I think that's also what teachers and educators value, and I think that's ultimately what helps students to succeed in the long run, is having some stability, having some consistency, and really focusing in on ways that we can support all of our students. So this is obviously a larger district than what I have been working in. Stoneham is just under 2,400 students. So obviously, building capacity and kind of building up and into a larger district, I think for me is not untenable in the sense that the challenges that you're facing, I have dealt with and am currently dealing with, and feel that that I bring that perspective to the table.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My turn. Okay, mine's budget related. What is your view of the role of the superintendent with the chief financial officer in the school and in the city? How would you build a budget, monitor the district's finances, and develop a good reporting system? And then, just sort of as an addendum to that, what's the highest budget you've been involved in, and what's the lowest budget you've been involved in?
Sure. Okay, thank you for the question. I think every dollar that is spent needs to be really scrutinized in terms of where it is going, into what types of programs are we funding. Are those programs are they successful? And if they're not, what kinds of adjustments might we need to make? what kind of data are we collecting to show the success of our investments. I think it's really important to bring forward both to the committee and to the city council and to the taxpayers the reasons and the rationale for the asks that the schools may need. The largest budget that I have been dealing with is currently, right now, our operating budget is just under $36 million for Stoneham. The school building project for the new high school that just opened in September was a $218 million project. And along the way, I have learned about the different levels of oversight that are not only required, but should always be put into place to have redundancies. My current committee and community, I believe, would say that I know the budget inside and out. When I'm here presenting, I want to make sure that I have the information that you need to help make informed decisions about what to support or what not to support in a budget. But it also, as I alluded to before, it goes beyond the school committee. It also includes the city council, and it involves our community members. And I think with the number of businesses and the amount of support that we could get from our partners through the Chamber of Commerce, as an example, there may be opportunities out there that are untapped that could help us with some really innovative ideas that we may not necessarily be able to afford in the operating budget, but that perhaps through some partnerships and maybe even through some grants that could assist us with our goals. I have a lot of experience also applying for and successfully getting grant support through both the state and federal funds. And in order to do that, it's not just to fill out the grant application, it's really trying to be prepared ahead of time, understanding what the grant parameters are, what it's targeting, and then really trying to make a decision around, is the time and investment worth the grant itself? Because a lot of times grants are for very specific programs, and other times you can be a little bit more innovative. So I think using discretion in what we might want to pursue for grant funding is an important part of the overall budget process. In terms of keeping a thumb on the current status of the budget, I meet biweekly with the Special Education Department, which is the largest budget within Stoneham Public Schools, to get a sense of what we're looking at in terms of unexpected costs, potential students that might be moving in or being outplaced, and then being able to make decisions if needed. Like this year, we had to freeze our budget very early, and making sure that we're being responsible to get down to June 30th in the black, so that we're meeting the expectations of the community, and we're showing that we're not being frivolous with any funds.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Thank you. So you mentioned one subgroup that I was going to ask about, special education. And I'd like to understand a little bit more about how have you in the past assessed the effectiveness around the special education programming that you've been a part of in your different districts, as well then if you could do also the effectiveness around ESL programs, because I think your districts have been a little bit of a different makeup.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'd like to understand that differential and then compare it to here, please.
Sure. So to start, I've done this a couple of different ways, and we've done, I've helped to lead or be part of a team that has done an internal assessment of our current special education programming, first to make sure that we're able to provide the continuum of services that are required for our students' learning needs, and understanding the implications for either changing programming or offering new programming. One of the things that happened in Stoneham is that we had a therapeutic learning program, as an example, at the elementary level several years ago. that cohort of students kind of fizzled out at the elementary level and moved up into middle and high school level. And as a result, having a tight budget, we reduced that program. In the end, what ended up happening is that a handful of students that then had the need, we did not have an internal placement for them and ended up having to place them out. And in the long run, cost-wise, we're spending a lot more money. And for the students' sake, we're sending them on a bus, sometimes for 45 minutes or an hour each way, away from their home peers and their home community. And I feel are not getting the full value of the supports that are within the community. So how to do something like that? It requires looking at data and being able to predict all the way down from preschool and trying to identify what are the patterns that we're seeing. In Stoneham, we're seeing a huge influx of students at the preschool level, so many so that when we built our new high school and preschool program, we built it for 6 classrooms. We're at 10 classrooms right now. So we're trying to catch up to that and really understand what this cohort of needs is going to mean and what it's going to look like for the elementary level and then through middle and high school levels. Another approach that I've taken is to contract out, and we worked with WestEd in Stoneham, and they came in and helped us by doing focus groups with faculty members, with our CPAC, with the administrative team, going into classrooms, and literally looking at our staffing models, but also looking at how well our programming fit with our student needs. And they actually provided a very comprehensive report to the Stoneham Public Schools, to myself, and to CPAC, and worked hand in hand with CPAC. CPAC is our Special Education Parent Advisory Council. And over the past couple of years, actually from last year, I should say, our CPAC has been very involved in providing voice to families that might not otherwise feel empowered to do so. And so their input has really been invaluable. And we have worked with CPAC to put information out there and to garner feedback through surveys, which we have followed up on this year from last year. And we've seen improvement, not in all areas, but in many areas in terms of qualitative feedback from parent satisfaction in the efforts that we're trying to do, trying to make better for families in terms of the referral process, the evaluation process, the communication process, and most importantly, developing relationships that enable them to feel more empowered. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can solicit input. It's just a matter of trying to figure out what's going to be the best fit for the community at that time.
Thank you. That we tackled special education. We'll come back around for EL a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so many questions to choose from, and you've answered so many, I'm sure, today. I'm going to go with how do you foster professional growth among your administrative team and teachers? And can you give an example of how you developed leadership skills in others?
Yes, could you repeat the last part?
Sure. How have you developed leadership skills in others?
Okay, thank you. So I think I'm a product of having really good mentors and having folks that have pushed me beyond my comfort level and saw something in me that I didn't maybe see in myself. And I carry that philosophy along in all of my leadership roles and trying to build capacity among teams. I feel very strongly about developing a distributive leadership model for not only to grow your own within, but because you can't do this. This work is really hard, and so developing skill sets in others really helps to set the trajectory of success for the school district. I think it's important for a leadership team to model that for the staff and to be involved with it. And anything that we are expecting or asking staff to do, I feel very strongly that the leadership team needs to be fully capable of understanding themselves. So one of the things that we have done is we partnered with the SEAM Collaborative, and we have a really unique model where we're sharing a universal design for learning instructional coach and a coach for diversity, equity, and inclusion with 6 other districts. We would not have been able to do that on our own with the size of our budget. It just wouldn't allow for us to have that type of capacity. So it's not only allowed us to work as a leadership team, but it's also extended beyond our own district, and we're exchanging really thoughtful ideas and partnerships with other school districts and what they're finding to be successful. I also think it's really important to ask teachers and all of our educators what they need, because what might be the best of intentions to plan out as part of a professional development plan or as part of a strategic plan may change on a dime based on what we have available for resources that year and what changes might be happening within the school district. So I'm fully committed to professional learning at all levels. And one of the often forgotten but very important part of our school districts are our paraprofessionals and what we can do to help support them along the way, and for those who are willing and ready to promote them into teaching positions and to be able to utilize their skill sets and expertise, especially where in Massachusetts and across the country we're really struggling to recruit high-quality educators. And by providing these types of pathways, I would hope that it would keep people invested into the Marlborough Public Schools.
Thank you.
Sure.
Alrighty, so what do you perceive is the superintendent's role in the community?
In the community?
Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry, there's a
okay.
fan going
Yeah.
back here and it's just hard for me to hear.
It's a crazy.
So I think the superintendent needs to be a partner with the city council. I believe that the school committee and the city council need to work in partnership. I believe that the mayor and the superintendent need to work together in partnership. I think visibility and meeting people where they are, and I mean that literally. So where are people hanging out? Is it Dunkin' Donuts? Because I've done that before. Is it, are there opportunities at the Chamber of Commerce? Are there churches? Where are people congregating that would be willing to engage in conversation about the schools and all the good things that we're doing here? And what are things that folks are interested in hearing about with the schools? What are ways that the schools can give back to the community in terms of community engagement and civic engagement of our students? What kind of untapped partnerships might be out there? Are there internship opportunities, job opportunities that we can partner with? Being able to open our doors so that folks aren't shy about coming in and seeing all the good things that are happening within the school district. I also think regular and consistent communication is really important, and I would do that by making sure it's accessible for folks that might require that in their first language. That's super important. And then I think also offering different types of formats, so focus groups or community forums. It might be even a one-on-one conversation. That would be really important. And public safety for me is always number one. So I think there's no more important relationship than between a school district and its fire and police departments. There's so much that I think we really rely on for one another in terms of physical safety, but also our approach to supporting all of our students. So I think being highly visible and approachable are things that are really important for a superintendent to advocate on behalf of the schools.
Thank you.
All right. Describe your approach to engaging with the school committee and advising them on key decisions. Can you give an example of how you successfully navigated a difficult decision or decision with the committee?
Yes, thank you. So I think, again, it goes back to that relationship building and being able to have opportunities for one-on-one time or two-on-one time. I know there can't be a quorum, so there's those tricky things. But I feel like having some overarching understandings. So, for example, having workshops and maybe even pulling together the administrative leadership team with the school committee to have some conversations about what are our current priorities, what are some of the things that we're currently looking to do better, what are some things that maybe we don't want or don't need anymore, and we can kind of put our focus into other areas. And I think trying to build consensus and having conversations and input so that all of our ideas together can be considered, and really using the committee as a sounding board, being the eyes and ears of the community and the constituents that you all represent is really, really important. And then obviously understanding, trying to get a measure of expectation around what is actually feasible so that we're not going in a direction that perhaps we're going to hit a wall and spend a lot of time maybe focusing on one area and then find out that it's maybe not feasible to continue. I would really depend on this group for your institutional knowledge because it's a unique opportunity for a superintendent to be able to come in and have the years of experience that many of you bring to the table, as well as the newer perspectives, because that's essential in kind of understanding where we've been, where we are, and sort of the trajectory that we might need to go. So I would rely on that input.
Inherent problem going last is all my questions have been asked around the table. So I'm going to ask you to wax philosophical a little bit. I'm sure, like most of us in education, you always consider it to be a work in progress. Work is never done. So looking at it sort of from the building analogy, do you consider yourself to be an architect, a builder, or a remodeler when you come into a new school system?
Oh, I like that question.
And obviously the question is, how do you see that manifesting itself in your work?
Yeah, I think a little bit of all of that. From that analogy, really trying to, I am a big thinker. I'm a big picture thinker. And, love to bring big ideas forward, but I'm also very much into the details as well to really understand the impact of decisions that are made. So I love to be able to think about innovative practices and ideas that we can do to move the district forward. Building those ideas is like working with the team and the teachers to try to make them a reality. Hopefully we're not going to be tearing anything down. That's not my intent at all. I've said this throughout the day today that you have a very strong and streamlined strategic plan in place, and I think that's part of the drawing, if you will, to kind of lay the roadmap. It's really important work that has already been laid out. So the last thing I would want to do is throw away those plans. I would want to continue the good work that's happening and try to continue to move it forward.
Thank you.
Do we have time for, can I ask just a clarifying question about something that you mentioned earlier about your high school project, and you mentioned the pre-K along with it?
Yes.
Did you self-fund that program? Like, how did you pay for the pre-K portion?
Yes, so the pre-K was not reimbursed expense by the MSBA, so that was not reimbursable expenses. So we knew that we saw that the need was increasing, and it was also a solution to some of the overcrowding that was happening within our elementary schools. So, so we put that into the project. The district offices were also supposed to be, they were in the project, but we had to value engineer them out as part of a $12 million reduction that we had to make in order to make everything fit. And we wanted to preserve all of the school programming as much as possible. So we tried not to touch anything that had to do with school and academic programming.
So
But
you self-funded it?
Yes.
Did you have to do like an override to get that money, or you just?
yes, there was a debt exclusion vote that was overwhelmingly supported by about 80% of voters voted for that. And that was just a few years ago. And right now, Stoneham is in a very precarious position. The town, but also the schools specifically, year over year, now over the past several years, we have about a $7.5 million deficit if you look at it combined. But for FY26, we're going for an override on April 1st. If it passes, the schools will be level funded, and the municipal side will have an increase in services in police, fire, and DPW. So it's going to be it's going to be really hard for taxpayers because they just added about $1,300 to the average tax bill for the debt exclusion. And if this override goes through, it's going to be about another $1,700 per household. So it's a big number. It has been needed for a really, really long time. And if we had been able to pass previous efforts or attempts at overrides, that number wouldn't be as big. Sure.
Okay. Does that count as my question? Or can I ask another question?
You can ask another.
Thank you. So I'm curious, you know, school committees, we have really 3 jobs, right? Hiring the superintendent, budgeting, and policy. And policy is sometimes tricky because we set policy and we work very closely with our staff and our administrators regarding the way policy is crafted. But sometimes when you're in the superintendent's seat, you are tasked with, you know, following policy, but also how do you do that and maintaining your kind of flexibility and your relationship with faculty and staff?
Sure, yeah. So I think a superintendent always has to know collective bargaining agreements, the contracts, policies are extremely important, and being able to understand the implications of either changing those policies, implementing new ones, or moving in a different direction with policies. You know, we're constantly needing to think about those things. So our local police department, as an example, we have SRO, one SRO currently. We're hoping, we had 2, went down to 1. We're hoping to get the second back. And they now have body-worn cameras. And so now we have to think about what is the impact of that in schools and how do we go about that. And so this is a very practical example of, you know, how do we deal with that? You know, you have a police department policy and you have a school committee policy that may not necessarily want cameras on. So how do you work with those different groups to iron those out? But then also there's a big communication component with the community about, well, how does the community feel about that? So some things that may seem very simplistic or, you know, like checking the box really have huge implications in how those things are handled. And sometimes some policies you need to spend a lot more time on than others.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
I have just a quick follow-up to actually to her question. You mentioned the override passed at 80%. How did you do that?
It was a really strong PR campaign. We literally took videos when it was raining and we had water coming down our stairwells and talked about and showed people. It was the visual. We walked people through the buildings so that they could see what we were dealing with in terms of the ceiling tiles and the electrical outlets. And at one point, we had wires sticking out. I mean, it was things that people heard about, but when they actually had the opportunity to see it, that sort of helped to get folks on board to say, yeah, we definitely need to fix this here. But we also talked about all the benefits that the community would have from it. So, the pickleball courts and an indoor track that we're going to be able to allow folks that want to come in and walk in the mornings, that they'll have access to that. The things that we felt were, a benefit for the whole community are things that we tried to focus in on to garner some of that support. And then we talked about what would happen if we didn't build a new building, and we were actually in the process of NEASC accreditation, and we were on warning level because of the condition of our building. So we also, honestly, if we hadn't gone through, we would have been very close to losing our accreditation. So we laid out all the facts, and as a superintendent, actually, I wasn't superintendent while that part of the process was going on, but I was helping to support and gather the information, being part of that process. And as a superintendent, you walk a fine line between sharing the facts and here are the choices if you do this, and here are the choices if we don't do this, without crossing the line of the ethics, right? There's ethics commissions and what you can and cannot do, and what you can and cannot put out in email with regard to an override as an example. So that was a big learning process for me that it's helped me now with this next override because I'm dealing with those types of things. Like folks want to come into the buildings and pass out flyers for yes or no vote. And I had to go back to the policies to look at how we deal with those kinds of things, and really relied on being able to get that information out. So it's all tied together.
How did you get the information out? Like, I get the showing, what vehicles did you use to get that information to the people who are going to vote?
Yep, so we literally town meeting style, going out, working with PTOs, going into the buildings, working with our school councils. We had Saturday meetings, we had night meetings. We tried to do different things where folks could either, in some instances, log in so that they could have access to the information. A lot of it was word of mouth and sharing the information and having a shared message so that everyone was using the same talking points so that there was real clarity about what was needed and why. And the message was not convoluted. It was a very clear messaging that we use, and I feel like that was what brought us to be able to have such support for that.
You can go to the next question if you want.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to ask another one if you want.
Okay.
Like that was a follow-up, but I'm good.
Okay. So, question I would have is, could you provide some concrete examples of steps you've taken to ensure staff safety, specifically relative to student behaviors and changes in student behaviors that has kind of been out there over the last number of years specifically?
Yes, so number one, we try to make sure that as many staff as possible are trained for CPI, crisis prevention and intervention. That is sort of our go-to if we have an instance where a student might be dysregulated, and being able to know whose role is what, and taking the reliance off of our BCBAs, as an example, our board-certified behavioral analysts who might typically be called for an instance where we might need their support, and being able to distribute It goes back to that distributive model where we're training more people to be available when needed in instances where a student might be dysregulated, but also understanding what types of mental health supports are available and really prioritizing throughout this whole time in our budget process. One thing that the committee and the administrative team really valued, and when we came together and had those workshops, we spoke very openly about our concerns with mental health. And so we knew right off the bat that we weren't going to touch school adjustment counselors, guidance counselors, school psychologists, that we knew that those positions really needed to be preserved as much as possible to meet the ongoing demands that are required of them. And then also looking at ways that we can use Tier 1, which is every student gets exposed to, in the elementary level as an example, we adopted Responsive Classroom. And that started out as grant funding through the Safe and Supportive Schools grant, which was a Massachusetts state grant. And then working in partnership with the town health department, we actually secured a Stop School Violence grant and then started trying to get a better handle on what our students' needs were. And so we also put out a survey, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. I'm not sure if Marlborough has participated in that. It's for students that are in grades 6 through 12. And it's basically asks students what are their concerns and needs, and it helps give us indicators around suicide ideation, as an example, which we found was extremely high for students in particular subsets. So our LGBTQ population was a significantly higher need for mental health services. So we started looking at that and how we could partner with other organizations such as Elliott Healthcare. And then we also tried something new, which I see Marlborough also partners with Cartwheel, which is a great online tool that you can refer students to for families that are not having success in getting mental health support for their students. So I think it's a wide range of things that kind of tackling it from all angles and looking at it from what can we do to support all of our students and our teachers in their classrooms, and then how do we provide supports for areas that we need to go deeper.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
I think we have time for like one more question.
Can I just clarify for you, just so you know, we also use Cartwheel and we participate in the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey.
Yeah.
Oh, good, good.
Oh.
It's a great tool. It provides some really good information.
Hey, Christian, if we're going an hour, do we have another 15 minutes since we started late?
If there's time for more questions, yeah, I mean, we can continue.
I do have another question.
Go for
if
it.
I may. My question is that I would like to know how you ensure that all staff members, including building principals, directors, teachers, all staff, feel supported, valued, and empowered to carry out their roles effectively.
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
Just how to carry out their roles effectively.
Thank you. I think it's really important to listen and to understand the needs by seeing it and hearing it and being there firsthand. I think earlier this afternoon, a similar question came up, and I talked about making time and spending time as part of my regular schedule to be in buildings, whether it's a more formal type of a setting, whether it's a faculty meeting or something much less formal, maybe it's a voluntary meet and greet. Office hours might be another way, even virtual office hours on an afternoon after school is dismissed, to be online at a certain time and just do Q&A and discussion. I think that's really important. And listening to the principals and what their needs are and what are areas that they're finding great success in. And I think it's so important, and I might sound like a broken record, but being able to really celebrate our successes so that we can take those wins and then move on to the next step, and just, I think, baby steps. That's sort of my personal and professional approach, is that if you look at everything in its totality, it can be very overwhelming, and it can be hard to know where to focus, and it can be hard to feel successful. So I think really hearing from teachers and even just being a sounding board so that I can listen to educators and say, am I hearing you correctly that you feel this way? And making sure that I'm understanding the messaging and the needs, I think is really important. Sure.
Have anything? Yeah, sure. Go for it.
I'm going to talk a little bit about negotiations. So obviously the superintendent is involved in working with the labor groups and negotiating contracts. Can you share your experience in collective bargaining and how you ensure that these negotiations are conducted fairly and collaboratively?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going through my second round of negotiations that I've been actively involved with as a superintendent. Prior to that, as an assistant superintendent, I sat through and I advised the superintendent, and I also acted as a liaison between the school committee and the school principals as we talked about potential language changes and what implications those might have had. So I think having an ongoing and strong relationship with the leadership team, with the MEA leadership, and not having surprises. And I heard that come up a couple times too, but ongoing monthly meetings are very important. I found that to be a way not only to just connect on matters that might be coming up, but to also form those relationships, to be able to find common ground about things that we're both interested in. And I love that Marlborough has used the IBB model. It's something that I've been interested in for a very long time. And I think now more than ever, there's a lot of value to that, and really focusing in on the issues and not necessarily the people. We're all here for the same reason. So it's really what can we do that's reasonable, that's feasible, number one, and how do we get those expectations set on the table so that we feel like we're working in unison toward a common goal. So that might mean even going into buildings and meeting with their reps individually, or meeting with the principals and the reps perhaps. And if a grievance or whatever does come to fruition, we talk about what could we have done to avoid that? What could we do better next time? What are the takeaways? And then I'm always taking notes on potential contract language, because I think it's meant to be intentionally, and sometimes it can feel very vague, and it can be open to interpretation. And so those are the most difficult times, right? So I think when you can go back and say, oh, this happened at that point, and it was because we had a disagreement on how we interpreted that language. What can we do to tighten that up a little bit? Sure.
Mr. Dan, do you have one?
The other advantage of being last is I can look at the questions again and find one I want to ask.
That's good.
Obviously, if you get the job here, you're leaving a place you've been at for a while. Are you satisfied with the performance of the district that you're leaving? Is there anything you could have done or should have done at this point that might have changed it either way?
Yeah, I feel like I'm leaving it in a much better place. We have worked really, really hard. It's a highly dedicated professional team of educators, from paraprofessionals, we call them our ESPs, educational support personnel, all the way on through administrative leadership and the central office team. We have a lot of work still to do, but some of the successes that I'm really proud of are that we instituted a new math program under my tenure as an assistant superintendent. We instituted a new literacy program under my tenure. We have gone after hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants. We've upgraded our security systems that would not have otherwise been possible without the use of grant funding. We have developed partnerships with our community and Project Lead the Way pathways that hadn't existed before. All of that good work has happened, and we still have so much more to do. And in particular, in Stoneham, we're really struggling providing the continuum of services that I mentioned before with special education, and really trying to have more of an inclusive model And when you look at our data compared to the state, our least restrictive environment, is much lower. Our inclusion rates are much lower than the state, they're much lower than the state average. And we're trying to bring that up. We need to have more of our students included more of the time. And I feel like we've also done a good job trying to bridge between gen ed and special ed and really understanding that there is no gen ed and special ed. It is education, and it's services that we're providing to students, helping them to access curriculum. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, is to change hearts and minds. I think that work is really never done. But that said, I feel like the district is really well positioned for the next person that comes into the role.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? If not, I have one final one. So my last question, I guess, is you're leaving a very small district that's in a town, and now you're applying for a position that has a very robust budget with a lot of diversity. Can you speak to that? What challenges you think you may have, or what
Sure.
successes you can bring from coming from such a
Yes,
small
absolutely.
town to a very large city?
Sure, yes. So obviously, coming from a town, a different form of government, it's literally, you have town meeting, and you have a finance committee, and you have a select board and a school committee that all work together. One of the things that I'm really proud of is that we have weekly tri-chair meetings. So that is a member of the select board, a member of the finance and advisory, and then the chair of the school committee. We all meet together, and so that we're working in unison. We're not competing. We all are about the same pot of money, and there's always give and take. So to me, that is really valuable to have those ongoing meetings. We sort out some of the ideas and the priorities so that when the full board comes together in public session, we still may have our disagreements, but we have a united front. The pot of money is, yes, it's much larger in Marlborough, but the principles are the same. The principles of working in unison, the principles of transparency and responsibility with the budget, and being able to provide rationale and data behind decisions. Those are all very, very much the same in my mind. And I see here the work changing in that it's working with a city council and a school committee. And then also, I would be really interested in how to engage more members of the public into the process. What I found in Stoneham is that so many people have come up to me and said, I've learned so much about the budgeting process that I never knew before. And that was because we were really doing a good job educating folks and helping them to feel empowered so that they could come and talk about the budget, the process, and the needs that they saw were important. So sometimes it's about empowering the public and the constituents to make them feel comfortable to show up to meetings or to watch online and to be able to provide their input.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else? We have. No, we're good. Speak now. Good. 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 You sure? You go.
So, if there's an opportunity, I have one last question.
Go for it.
So, Marlborough is a very diverse community. I'm sure you've read about us or learned about us. And one of the things that we have been trying to work on through the years is how to engage our immigrant communities, our families, more in the process, because as we know, when families are involved, the kids tend to do better. How have you approached, if you have, that sort of thing, engaging families, particularly families that do not speak English and maybe recently arrived here?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question. I think that's a really important piece of student success is that the schools and the families are working together, and for a lot of folks, their experiences might be very different, and it can feel very intimidating coming into a school district that perhaps they might not know anything about. So one of the things that I saw happening here that really captured my attention was at the high school, they're offering a new course called Welcome to Marlboro. And I thought, what a great idea for parents, right? Why not develop something like that for new parents and caregivers that are coming to town? It would, obviously we would want to set it up so that it could be successful, and if we needed interpreters, we could do that. But I think it's really about empowering parents so that they can feel involved in the process, helping them to network and build some social capital within the town, and maybe even providing some type of a fair or a community event where they could come in and learn a skill. One of the things that we've talked about doing in Stoneham is offering like a CPR night, because everybody could learn CPR, and it's not really that intimidating, and it brings people through the door. And once you get people through the door, it kind of opens other opportunities. I talked today about how neat it would be to try to offer a night class for parents, and maybe even partner with Assabet or partner with Quinsigamond, and have our high school kids provide childcare, maybe even in dual language, and then offer our parents things that they could do for skill sets, access to the computer lab, talking about all the things that the Marlboro Public Schools offer. And another idea is to even start doing something like having students run or be part of their student-parent conferences, so that the students are engaging with their parents about the successes and the challenges that they're having in school. And it could be in their first language, with a teacher there that's helping to provide and guide the process. So I think there's a lot of creative ways to get folks in with some innovative thinking, and maybe some grant money. These are the types of things that grants could fund. And I think partnering with other districts, and Hudson's right next door. They're a much smaller district, but they're facing some similar things. So could we share resources and try to partner with them? So I think there's some potential for creativity there.
Thank you.
Sure.
I know, yes.
Sorry, just, So I'm just curious, have you had experience with TNTP, the new teacher project? And do you feel like that might be something to do more here? We've had some exposure to it. I'm just curious.
Yes, so I've been doing a lot of research. TNTP is a fabulous resource. From everything that I've learned, I think they're a great fit. I was really excited to hear that they're working with Marlboro. I spoke with one of the principals today, and I asked, what's the feedback from the educators, and they found that it's been very successful. And although I haven't worked directly with the new teacher project, I have worked with other entities such as the Hill for Literacy in trying to do very targeted supports for our teachers. But I think TNTP is a really good match. And from what I've heard, the early indicators are that it's showing a lot of success.
Great, thank you.
Alrighty, I think that's just about does it for time. Alrighty, well, we thank you. I know it's been a long day.
Sure,
So,
thank you.
yes, so thank you.
All right, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. I'm so excited and thrilled to be here. And as I said, my approach is really to work with all constituents, and I feel like Marlboro would be a terrific fit. I hope that the community felt that way, and I look forward to hearing from you all. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thanks. Thank you.
See you.
We will take a 2-minute recess, and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alrighty, welcome back. Thank you for your patience as we had a little recess. So next is the next candidate who is joining us shortly. His name is David Thompson, and he'll be joining us momentarily. So we can start this process yet again.
And I have not met him yet.
Here he is. Hello.
Hello, is everybody? Good. How are you? Good. Thank you. Good to be here. I have some presents. She just give me.
This is Michelle Bodenhead.
Thank you. Sorry. I wanted to show you my paper passing skills. See if I still have them.
Thank you.
That teaching stuff. So this is just a draft
Thank you.
of an entry or a transition plan. You know that I'd be fortunate enough to be a choice.
Okay, so so we're actually being recorded live right now
right.
from
Sorry.
WMCT-TV, and it gets rebroadcast. So the people at home that are watching, I know there's a lot of them, they won't be able to hear you unless you're next to the
Unless
microphone.
I have the green light on. The green light is on, so I'm good. All right.
So, Mr. Dave Thompson, welcome. So if you could just want to introduce yourself and kind of pick up where you were leaving with this.
Yeah,
people
so
can hear you.
so I handed out a draft of a entry plan, a transition plan. It is a draft. Obviously, if I was fortunate enough to be the committee's choice, I would want to sit down and see if there were things on there you would add to the list. But just to give you an idea of what that would kind of look like. So, all
Thank you.
right, and that's for your look at whenever you would like. So.
Appreciate that. So if you don't mind, so we'll start off by introducing yourself, give a little background.
Sure.
And last time, Michelle kicked it off with a question, and then we kind of go around the table, and we'll ask the questions. So the floor is yours, so please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I've met, I think, almost everybody here, but there's probably people at home who have not met me. Oh, and
Correct.
Michelle, correct?
So she usually sits right here, so that's her nameplate. So
Can I pretend she's there?
you can, you can.
Yeah, okay.
You're going to try and move it around.
Yeah. So I'm Dave Thompson. I am currently the interim superintendent in Mashpee. This is my 8th year as a school superintendent. I am also the proud product of the Marlborough Public Schools. I went to school here in Marlborough from kindergarten through all the way through and graduated from Marlborough High School. It's been an incredible day today, spending time with passionate teachers, incredible administrators, a lot of the school committee, you, Mr. Mayor, and also got to see some of, I just visited my 3rd grade classroom. So it's been a little surreal coming back at this point, but I think it's important that you know that this is a place where I got my start. There are educators that brought me along on my journey, provided me an opportunity to learn and grow. I did my student teaching here in Marlborough, started my educational career, and the opportunity to really kind of come back and give back to the city that gave me so much growing up would truly be kind of a full circle and an honor. I'm an experienced administrator, as you can see from my resume. I have been superintendent, assistant superintendent, principal, assistant principal, teacher. I've done every stop along the way, done it at a very high level. My passion has never changed. I got into this to make a difference. That is still what drives me today. And I'm focused on educating the whole child, focused on what is happening in our classrooms to make sure that our students have the best opportunity to move themselves forward and be productive citizens in our city. So,
Okay,
start with that.
alrighty. We'll start with the questions.
Okay, well, and I just want to apologize for not being able to be there and meet you in person, but
Thank you.
lovely to meet you
Nice to meet you.
virtually. So you touched on this a little bit, but my first question is, why Marlborough? What do you bring, aside from some historical perspective, in terms of your skill set that draws you to coming back here? What about us do you think makes a good fit for you?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. So, I'm coming from, in the place of Norwood, I'm coming from a district that is very similar in demographics and challenges, have done really good work there and moved that district forward, basically repaired that district from one that was underfunded and kind of falling apart to one that was moving forward. Did that in a collaborative way, building on experiences and things that were happening already in the district to move that district forward. I think that those experiences will help me do the same thing here in Marlborough. There's a lot of great things going on. But we're obviously not getting all the results that we want, and my ability to come in, diagnose what's going on in the classroom, look at instructional practice, work collaboratively with the leadership team and the teachers to develop a plan to go forward is a strength that I bring to the district. So, a little bit about me, so that kind of comes into this. So I have been the middle school principal of the year. I've mentored 2 other middle school principals of the year and a blue ribbon school principal as well as worked with DSE doing underperforming and exceptionally performing school visits. So I have a toolbox of going in and being able to look at instructional practice and design a way to move forward, and I think that's something that would help Marlborough move on to the next step. It's kind of tough because I feel badly for not looking at you over there.
It's okay.
Yeah, but that, and my passion to do this work, we saw in Norwood, we saw an incredible increase, especially in our EL population right after COVID. It really is God's work and work that is really important and something that we have excelled at. And I think I bring that piece of that expertise to the table as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. What is your view of the role of superintendent with the chief financial officer in the school and the city? How would you build a budget, monitor the district's finances, and develop a good reporting system? And in addition to that, what's the biggest budget you've worked with? What's the smallest budget you've worked with?
Okay, yeah, so, so as the superintendent, you are the spokesperson of the district, so you really need to know what is going on. I regularly meet with my business manager to get an update on what is going on. There's always the open door, if there's an emergency, come in and see me sort of thing. So that is a close relationship. One thing that I work very hard on is building relationships with the finance committee, with the mayor, obviously, to have open channels of communication. So when there's a challenge that comes along, I'm not going to sit on that. I'm going to express, hey, just so you know, we had this concern coming up. We have an out-of-district placement coming up that we didn't budget, or someone had moved in with a need, and we need to provide an educational plan for them in our schools, and that's going to mean staffing and what have you and whatnot. So building relationships and building trust. I'm very transparent. I'm honest to a fault, and I'm going to give the full picture as I know it, and if that changes, I'm going to update people. That builds trust and respect in what we're doing. School budgets are shifting sands. There's always a new challenge coming along, and being able to have those communication and that trust is important in that. So, and that's the same for the school committee. Making sure that you are informed, what is going on. My general rule is I don't want anybody surprised in the grocery store, at the soccer field, or whatever else it might be as to what's happening in the schools, and making sure that that happens. Smallest budget, I think that is now where I'm looking at a $26 million one. Largest one was $56 million. That doesn't include the $158 million building project, though. It's a different pot of money.
From pocket.
So can you provide some details about when you've been able to assess the effectiveness of your special education programs, either currently in Mashpee or reaching back to Norwood? What are some of the criteria that you use that you feel would be beneficial in moving here?
Yeah, so I look, and again, I tend to look at things from different angles, but I look at special ed from several different things. One is the quality of the programs. Okay, are we meeting kids' needs? The other is, looking at the data and our special ed kids moving forward. Ultimately, the goal in anything, but especially in special education, is that they are leaving us with the ability to work and do whatever they want to do on their own. The reality is, and I'm not sure every parent realizes this, when a student graduates grade 12, the special ed laws go away and it basically just becomes a 504. So that reasonable accommodation piece. So we need to have students that are leaving our care, leaving our schools in a position to function in a workplace on their own. And there are some exceptions to that, life skills, for instance, and there are programs where people will be enrolled and there's, a group home situation. But that's the goal. So there needs to be a progression of skills and, I tell people, and I'm actually the parent of a child with special education needs. So I tell people that we are, we're teaching these children how to work around or work with their disabilities. They're really not going away. You get better at working around them. And how are we doing that? And going back to, part of the way you do that is you have students in the regular classroom doing grade level work with support, with scaffolds to do that work. And as they get better, you take the scaffolds away so they're standing on their own. Programming, and I do not like to send students out of district, and there's several reasons for that. Back to that progression piece, if students are progressing and they could go into an inclusion setting or part-time in an inclusion setting, if they're out of district, that doesn't exist. So you've limited their ability to grow. The other piece is that these kids are not with their peers. They don't have anybody to play in the neighborhood. All their friends are at some other town, some other place. And there's always exceptions, but to the most we can, good quality in-district programming that ensures our kids are getting what they need. So those two things.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Again.
Hello.
Let's see. How do you foster professional growth among your administrative team and teachers? And looking back at your resume, you state you rebuilt, and during your time in Norwood, go Mustangs. You rebuilt it says you rebuilt administrative team on core belief of teamwork, collaboration, and support for the mission of the district. Can you elaborate a little bit about that and give examples of how you've developed leadership skills in your district?
So the first thing, well, I don't know if I should go back to hiring, but knowing, and again, knowing your people, right? Knowing what their skills are, knowing what they're bringing to the table. When I have hired members of the team, it's first, are they going to be able to function with the team? And then, are they going to be able to do this particular job? Do they have the qualifications, experience? But then it's what other skills do they bring to the team, right? So the last principal I hired, one was a math coach in her earlier life. Another one was really an expert on social emotional learning. Okay, so bringing these people in so those skill sets build the whole team, and other people can and myself included, can benefit from that expertise. So, so you have the district goals and the district PD, but you also want to make sure you're trying to grow people, and part of that is knowing where do they want to be in 5 years? What do they think they need to work on? And you have to have relationships and trust to have that conversation. Okay. One thing about me is that my phone is it's actually in the car right now, but my phone is with me at all time, and my administrators are priority calls that'll ring in the middle of the night. Right. I'm always there for them, always there to support them. They know that. I'm invested in them being successful. If they're successful, their schools are successful, their teachers are successful. So and knowing what their dreams are, those self-assessments as part of the evaluation cycle about growth, where do they think they need to grow? That's a hard conversation if you haven't built the relationships and the trust, but that's where I start with that. The team, there are core values about teamwork, about discourse and how we're going to do it, and that we're all in this together. Our team agendas have always been a joint, I don't own the agenda, they don't have to get my permission to put something on there. If there's something that's a burning question, they can put it on the agenda. It's a shared Google Doc. There's a certain format that I ask that they use. They introduce the topic, we had the discussion. You know, and there's rules, you know, we can disagree, you know, but, you know, we might not come to a conclusion that day. We might come back, but, you know, we're going to walk out of there together, and still, no matter what, you can call somebody else and get that sort of support. This is hard work, and you can encounter challenges, and if you don't have other people to lean on, and that doesn't always have to be the boss person, it could be another principal as well. So, you know, one thing that I did in Norwood is those two principals that are mentioned there as the principal of the year and the blue ribbon principal are people that I have said to them, you really should think about becoming a superintendent because you're crazy. You know, you should really think about becoming a superintendent because you had the skill set, you had the disposition to do it, and disposition is an important piece as well. And fostering that and encouraging them to continue to grow to do that.
Can I just ask a follow-up on that?
Sure.
Just out of curiosity, so when you're saying rebuilt administrative team, is that pulling from within district and moving people up into other positions? Or is that pulling from outside? I'm just trying to understand that a little bit further about how to develop, because that's something that's important for us.
So when I say rebuilt, when I entered Norwood, there were 4 principals retiring. So I hired 4 principals. Through that time of attrition, so I had to change the dynamic of how the team worked, because it was not that collaborative piece. Okay? And I don't want to throw dirt on anybody else, but it was not that there were not honest conversations going on. The 6 elementary schools were not on the same page, okay? So I had to set forth expectations and processes to get us there, okay? So the unfortunate thing about Norwood is anyone who has applied internally, you know, my rule is that they get an interview, because they're part of our team. You know, they should at least get an interview. I have not had any teacher applied to be a principal. I take that back. I have one teacher who applied to be an assistant principal, is now the associate principal. She very well might become the principal of Norwood High School, some other things, but she is the only one. And part of that is, you know, the elementary schools are one-man. You know, it's one principal, small school, you're doing everything, and a lot of the other teachers have not. So there is one elementary principal who did move up from within. There's one secondary high school person that moved from department chair to assistant principal to associate principal. But the others have come from outside, not for any sort of not wanting that. That's just how it is. Now, conversely to Mashpee, I have had 4 people move up from inside. So it's not a disposition of,
No, and thank you for the clarity.
Yeah.
I appreciate you, you know, letting me kind of follow up with that, only because I think that, you know, deserved a little bit more clarity, that there were people retiring and what you meant in rebuilding.
I do not go, there are other people who will come in and like, I have to bring my people. I am not one of those people. So I like to work with the people that are, you know, I've had people in central office retire, but I have not pushed anybody out.
Thank
So,
you.
you're welcome.
Appreciate the clarity.
Yeah.
Thank you. What do you perceive is the superintendent's role in the community?
In the community. Well, I'm the face of the district, right? So, you know, I do like to share the spotlight with other people. I don't feel that I have to be the person, but I am, because of the position, I'm the face of the district, which means that I'm the one that has to answer the questions and I'm the one that has to walk through the fire every once in a while, and that's part of the job. You know, being visible in the community is important, especially in the beginning, because you have to build those relationships, and part of that entry plan is getting and sitting down with those important stakeholders in the city, but also just, you know, informal times, you know, looking at, you know, coffee hours or going to the football game or going to the basketball game or the play or whatever it might be, and just having those chance encounters, not scripted, if you will. The other thing that really needs to be done is some sort of two-way communication plan. I'm not quite sure exactly what the plan is, but when do we have town halls? I mean, I've done coffees, moderate success. I've done Facebook Lives back during COVID and what have you. Currently, I do a podcast, to try to get out and interact with people. We do surveys, report out on that with parents and students that are kind of related to see if there's a difference in perspectives on what's happening in our schools. But that two-way communication and being the face of the district.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Describe your approach to engaging with the school committee and advising them on key decisions. Can you give an example of how you successfully navigated a difficult discussion or decision with the committee?
Yeah, so I think I talked a little bit about this, but my job is to make sure you guys have the information you need to make the important decisions that you have to make. And I firmly believe in it, so if something happens that you might hear about, you're going to hear about it from me first. So that's my intent, okay? I do not want anybody being surprised wherever. As far as interacting, I am one-on-one sit-downs, at least twice a year. Weekly conversations with the chair of the school committee. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. But, time to do that. And then, anything that I send out, if there is a question, you will have my cell phone, you will have my email, you can text me. I will answer the question to the best of my ability. So I am very open, very transparent, willing to communicate, and that, I think, because, we have roles and we have work to do, but we have to have trust and communication in order for that to happen at a high level. And it has to happen on a high level for, the benefit of the entire district. As far as, so a lot of it recently has been around policy. Obviously the competency determination, don't play with the cap anymore, sorry, the competency determination. So, I listened to several webinars, did some research on what other groups and districts were doing, looked at it, sat down with a policy subcommittee, and basically went through, we did what most, actually it's funny, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed just came out with the same policy that basically I did a month ago, and brought that to the school committee for their conversation. Most districts were just going with a passing grade, like a 60. I'm not quite sure that's competency, so we did have a discussion, and we did bring that up to a 65, 64, 65 in order to be competent, count for competency, and then that was adopted. I'll go back to a more difficult one this year. There was a member who wanted to go back to the kind of dress code policy that actually is not aligned with the law at this point. So, I did my research, checked with the school attorney to make sure I was right, sat down, presented it all to this particular school committee person, so that she still wasn't happy and wanted me to find another person, another lawyer who would tell her something different. I said, well, that's not quite how it works. But this was a brand new member. But that was a little bit more of a difficult conversation, but it was a one-on-one conversation to ensure that that trust was built up there, and I wasn't, calling her out in front of her peers or something along that line. You're welcome.
You've alluded to something that I'm going to ask you, but you've alluded to it in the last few questions. I know that education is a work in progress. It's always under construction. And using that analogy, do you consider yourself coming in a new system to be the architect, the builder, or the remodeler? And how does that manifest itself in what you do?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I'm fearful if I say this answer, you're going to think I'm cheating, but I'm not. At times, all three. Okay, so coming in to Marlboro, you have a strategic plan that has one more year left on it. So in that instance, I would be a builder probably to finish that plan. As I'm sitting here and transitioning in, that would be gaining information and facts and seeing how things actually work to maybe become the architect of the next plan. Okay? If there is something that's not working in that plan or is not reachable or off track, then I might need to be a repair person.
Very good.
How'd I do?
Pretty good.
Okay, all right, good. I do have a sense of humor, so if you're in this position, you take yourself too seriously, you're probably going to combust. Oh, back over here.
Yes, back to me, and I'm just trying to find my, I've got dueling devices here, so,
Okay.
sorry. Policy, that's what I asked about. So, I apologize. So, school committee members, we have 3 jobs, right? We hire and supervise the superintendent, we set policy, and we do budgets. Regarding policy, the superintendent and administrators collaborate with Mrs. Hennessy and her team to develop policy for our district. How do you see the balance in your role between making sure that school committee policies are being met, but also supporting teachers or families who might want to be pushing back on it or want some flexibility? How do you negotiate that?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. See, so, the majority of the policies are based on law, Chapter 70, Chapter 72, Chapter 74. So, I mean, there's a certain amount of them that are kind of set. MASC does a lot of work. I'm assuming you work with them on those policies. So then, so then, the real work is usually around, here's the model policy, here's the law, here's the model policy. What's the construct for Marlborough, right? So that is, and then the other side of it is you adopt the policy, but the administration has to adopt procedures to actualize the policy. So need to ensure that you're meeting the letter of the law and the direction, advice, legal advice from the school committee association, but also still making sure it's going to stick in Marlborough, okay? And it's going to be implementable, if that's a word, okay? So, so that's the balance. And, so what I'll do is I'll take those draft documents. We might have a conversation. I'm not quite sure how we do it here, but we might have a conversation as the administrative team about the policy, if there's any concerns about implementation or how it would work, and then we would come back and have that conversation. So I would be gathering information and doing some vetting of a draft. And I say draft because if you have a draft that has a talking point, it takes less time than just a blank piece of paper, right? And then come back and have that conversation with the school committee. If we don't agree, then we go back again. So that's kind of how I approach policy. A lot of the ones that are coming down now are changes in law and federal law in some cases, maybe. So, and yeah, but so that's where most of that comes from. Or there was some incident that happened somewhere else in the state, and making sure that we're not in the same position some other district was in, and what have you. So that's how I approach that. And then if we're not agreeing, the other thing that we can and should do is look at our own legal counsel and have them take a look at it and see what their opinion is.
Can I just follow up with something? So I don't think I articulated myself very well, but I love that explanation on how you get to the policy.
Yeah.
My question, and going back to the example that you gave in the previous question, we have, let's a dress code policy, and you walk into school buildings and clearly people are not following the dress code policy. What do you do about that?
Well, then that's a conversation with the people who are supposed to be implementing the policy. So policy, the policy is the law of the land. And I explain to people the one way to shorten your tenure as a superintendent is not following school committee policy, because that's what your directive is, right? So then the question is, why isn't it being implemented the way it should be? what are the barriers? Can we fix the barriers, or do we need to go back and re-examine the policy? So that's how that would happen. But there really isn't, if the policy's not being implemented, then that's a problem on the administrative side, and it needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So another follow-up on that. Talk about policy. There's a new policy or a new version of a policy that we work on and approve. A, how do you communicate it to the whole staff? And B, when staff misinterpret it, how do you address that?
Yeah, so, it depends on who it impacts. Like, there's certain policies that are not going to impact a regular teacher, and then but in general, what I do is that each school has a policy manual. Okay, they are given, the principals are given the new policy, told to replace it in the policy manual. If it's something that staff needs to be trained about, then at our leadership team or at elementary team principals or principals meeting or whatever, we will talk about what that is, and we would cover it at a staff meeting to make sure everybody's up to date on that. So that's how it, and then, weeks later, any problems with it, how did that go? Any problems with implementation? Any questions? What have you. So that's basically how I've got about making sure that policy gets down to the buildings and the classrooms.
And if there's a misinterpretation, they get the policy, they think they know what it means, and it's incorrect.
If it's a brand new, difficult policy, then we would have talked about it during leadership team.
What I'm saying is if a part of your staff is misinterpreting the policy and they're acting a certain way they shouldn't because the policy
Then the
is something
building
else.
principal should correct the misinterpretation.
So you defer that to the principal? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can do your next
I mean,
one?
No, that's good. That was enough.
I mean, the chance of the superintendent having to trip across some sort of particular policy piece may or may not happen, with 7 buildings moving around. And ultimately, the principal's got to be making sure the policies are consistently being implemented in the building.
So my question's changing from policy, but I guess actually, kind of ties a little bit into it, is around some of the student behavior issues and the safety for our staff around some of the behavior issues. We've been having a lot of conversation here in district about that, and I'm just kind of curious, is that discussion that you've been having at Mashpee or that you've had at Norwood, and how would you support the staff and our student body around those issues?
Yeah, so it is definitely a conversation we had in Norwood. It is not a conversation in Mashpee. And part of that is where Mashpee is on some of the things that we were working on in Norwood. So Mashpee has an incredible social emotional learning program. It is, so I'm just going to step back. So this student behavior is a very complex issue. There is not a simple answer to it, because you're dealing with individuals, you're dealing with trauma, you're dealing with all sorts of things that impact this, right? So basically, you need to approach it from multiple angles. A stricter punishment does not necessarily change behavior. The punishment doesn't change behavior. It's reflecting on what happened and how to improve it changes behavior. Once upon a time, I don't know if I won't go there, but once upon a time, if you came home in trouble, you were in double trouble, right? That's, for various reasons, that's not always the case, for worse and for not, and worse, okay? But basically, a highly structured social emotional learning piece. When I entered Norwood, SEL was just 10 minutes on the carpet, we're done, we went through the rigmarole. No, it needs to be, it needs to be explicitly taught, it needs to be integrated into other parts of the curriculum, and it needs to be assessed, and if kids are not learning those key strategies and self-management pieces, then we need to be doing tier 1 and tier 2 intervention to work with them. And if there's a kid with significant trauma, then that needs to happen as well. As far as behavior goes, your positive behavior intervention support, and again, at Mashpee, they have those. They have the Falcon 5. They have all these things about what we are expecting for behavior, and the kids participate in that, okay? It's really extremely well done. The kids buy in, they know what the good behavior is, they celebrate the good behavior. So you have the social emotional, the individual piece, you have the culture of the school piece, okay? And then the third leg of that stool is a discipline process that causes children to reflect and repair what happened. And it really is about relationships, okay? Is there a good, strong relationship between the student and the teacher, between the student and the principal, or whomever else is there, the student and the behavior analyst who may or may not be in there? If you have a kid who's having significant behavior problems, then there needs to be a plan to improve behavior. It doesn't happen quickly. And if, but there are lines that also need to be drawn with that as well. If you have a kid that is really engaged in very dangerous behavior, we need to find another place where that trauma or whatever it is can really be worked on before they're back in the regular piece. I think the key thing for parents is that and we can't say, oh, well, Johnny got a detention, or Johnny had to do this, or Jolly, we can't talk about what the consequences are, but we can assure them that it is going to be dealt with, and we are going to work to change the behavior. And that doesn't matter if it's a minor behavior or a major. We need to address all behaviors and get them corrected, and students learning from that and improving in their personal behavior.
So you focused a lot on student. I'm going to ask, how do you support your staff, though?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So the key thing there is the trauma-informed PD around how that works. The BCBAs coming in with kids that are exhibiting their trauma or need a behavior plan, okay? And then if there is a kid that's having, for whatever reason, a really bad day, having the support people in the building to come, and rescue, as you will.
Okay.
But that's what we have done, and have seen improvement in behavior over time. But that's the difference. So we were building the SEL program and building the PBS program. In Mashpee, they have it smaller community, have it down a little bit more. And I can honestly tell you, out of 1,400 kids, there's maybe 4 or 5 that we have. I mean, there's some kids with autism that, not counting those, but 4 or 5 in the entire district.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
So I would like to know, how do you ensure that all staff members, including your building principals and directors, as well as your teachers and staff, feel supported, valued, and empowered to carry out their roles effectively? How do you do that?
What was that last part?
Carry out their roles effectively.
Yeah. So obviously, I want every single member of our school community to feel that they belong and they're valued and they're part of the team. How do I do that? I spend time in classrooms. I try to get to know people. That takes a certain amount of time with as many staff as are here. But know them, support them, take an active interest in what's going on in their classrooms. Visits mean an awful lot. Ensuring that they have the support that they need to do the best job that they can. One thing that I do is that when I do observations of principals, we go out and we do joint observations of teachers and talk about teacher practice and how they can be supported, because that's their first line of support. I think walking in with kindness, first and foremost, and appreciation for the work and what they bring to the classroom. So I walk into this work with a tremendous amount of gratitude and appreciation for the work and the work that they're doing. And I will tell people the most important people are those people sitting in front of our kids on a daily basis. Okay, they are more important than me, because that's where the important work is happening. And I truly believe that. My job is to make sure that my teachers have the tools and the training and the resources to do the best work that they can. And once they see that happen, they tend to be supportive. The other thing that I have done is really established a very vigorous onboarding program with new teachers to make sure that they are starting in, because you're making an investment with these folks. So to ensure that they have the tools, how do you do open house? How do you do grades? How do you do parent-teacher conferences? These things that can be flashpoints, in the first year as a teacher. How do you do discipline? How do you effectively create a classroom culture where kids can be successful? And so you have your couple days before school opens, but then you have regular meetings throughout the year to address and to help support teachers in that. And if there's a teacher that feels that they want to come to that, they're not in the first year, then it's an open door. Come on down. And there's no judgment there. Okay? I think teachers knowing that the superintendent, the principal has their back and wants them to be successful goes very far away.
Can I just follow up and ask, how do you also support, you talked a lot about teachers.
Yeah.
Well, how do you also support your building principals? And how do you continue to foster, their relationships and making their buildings successful?
Yeah, so so again, back to that trust in the leadership team, that transcends into, I position myself to be a thought partner with them. So when they're challenged, if there's a challenge going on, they can pick up that phone, they can call me, and they know that we're going to work through that together. Okay? I'm going to set them up to do the work, because that's where the learning is. The learning's in the doing, not me running in and doing it for them. But, help them make good decisions, help them do the best work they can to support, students and teachers in that. So bringing my experience and expertise to the table for them to access. And they know that I'm going to support them in doing that. And we have difficult conversations about growth and what areas they need to improve, and we'll put together a plan on how to do that, if that's the case. Say, well, you're really good with this, but this is an area you need to work on. And, this other principal does a very good job of that. Talk to her. We'll come back and look at that as part of your evaluation cycle. And it's not a gotcha, because we're talking about improvement and we're planning for that together.
So you went from a $54 million budget in Norwood down to a $26 million budget in...
$58 million to 26, but that's all right. It's only numbers.
Well, I'm reading your $54 million budget here in your resume.
Okay, all right,
so,
yeah.
And then to a $26 million budget in Mashpee. So obviously, both are towns. We're a very large city, much larger budget,
Yep.
more students. And you just reflect on the challenges that you may see by going from a smaller community to a larger city.
Yeah, kind of, challenge. I mean, obviously, there's a few more wheels that turn. The essential functions of a school system are similar. You've got buses, you've got buildings, you've got, it's how many you have and how many lines you have to keep track. It's a volume thing. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a strategic piece. The budget, process and the reconciliation, because there's more moving parts, might be more involved. But as far as how I would go about managing the budget and supervising the budget, that's not going to change. And what I'm going to expect from my finance department to make sure that I'm on top of what's going on. But when it comes to perhaps reducing, there's more things to look at. And I've had that. Oftentimes the smaller budgets don't have as much, there's not as much extra in there, or places you can pull a little bit. So in a smaller budget, if you have to cut $100,000, that's a bigger piece of the pie than $100,000 out of a $56 million budget, right? So in some ways, bigger budgets are kind of easier, but I won't say that again, but yeah. Yeah.
You good?
I'm good.
Obviously, earlier you heard we do interest-based bargaining, or we have for the last 4 cycles through with the MEA. in working with the labor groups and negotiating contracts, can you share your experience in collective bargaining and how you ensure that they are conducted fairly and collaboratively?
Yeah. Well, I love that you do IBB. That is, I did that in Blackstone Millville and absolutely loved it because it takes that adversarial piece out of it completely. What I have done in Norwood and now in Mashpee is try to be as collaborative as possible, and that doesn't start, oh, we're going to bargain. Let's be collaborative. I mean, that, again, building relationships, that starts as soon as I hit the ground, all right? Working with your presidents, establishing relationships. You're not always going to agree, but trying to solve problems together builds collegiality in doing that. I am always fair. I'm not trying to take advantage of anybody. You know, ultimately, these people we're negotiating with are the people that are working with our kids and doing the important work of the district. And, you know, as a former teacher, it really kind of is a calling, and I truly respect and value that work. So I think going in with that, with an appreciation for the work that's being done and the work that they're doing, is very important. And, you know, I might have said this in one of the previous interviews, but when I arrived in Norwood, you know, I arrived in July and discovered that the paras union was in mediation. And I'm like, why? And I'm like, why are we in mediation with the paras? And you know, it came back down to, again, a poor relationship that then drove the negotiation off the deep end. So, you know, I'm in there and I'm like, I can't believe that I'm mediating over, it basically was about $15,000, mediating about $15,000 for people who have their sleeves rolled up and doing the work, right? So then we get 3 years later, the union kind of moved on from the person kind of responsible for the poor relationship on their side. I had already built relationships with them. We had a very collaborative, respectful conversation about their work and a fair proposals put forth on both, and really talking about perspective and why this and how could we do that? Well, how about this? How about that? Okay. At the end of that negotiation, it ended with everybody hugging each other. Okay. And then, you know, for the last 5 years, the president and vice president would check in on me, make sure I'm doing okay. Okay? And it's about treating people with respect, valuing what they do, and evaluating their contribution to the team, because it really is a team effort. Everybody is important to make sure that what's going on in that classroom is happening at a high level. So, and then, you know, I'll switch over to Mashpee, you know, and they have, you know, a history that I'm just walking into, but we are working collaboratively with the paras to create a career ladder program to set up a system where paras can, you know, get reimbursement for courses and do certain things and be able to become teachers, because we're going to need to create some sort of pipeline for them, and that is going well. And I've only had 7 months to build those relationships, so I build relationships pretty quickly. So
Obviously, if you get this position, you're leaving another one.
yes.
How do you feel the performance of that district is doing? And if, let me try to figure out how to say this question correctly. And how do you feel you're leaving them? In what condition are you leaving them? And anything you think you might or should have done differently?
Yeah. So so there's there's a couple things. So, and again, I'm like, and you'll hear it, you're probably like, oh, here he goes again. But I'm really focused on what's happening in the classroom, and is that the best it can be for our kids. And so when I walk around and I visit these schools and I use all of this experience that I have looking at the instructional piece is not consistent, okay? And there is not coherence of the programs. So there are a lot of good things, but the academic achievement should be much higher for the investment that they have done with materials, tools, and materials, tool, and resources. It should be higher. So, and there is, 75% of our ELs are fairly new from Brazil. There are those pieces as well, but in general, overall, should be performing higher. So, and again, I'm an interim. My contract ends in June. My advice to the incoming superintendent, I am going through some of this with the school committee, is to talk about what is our instructional foundation. Is it universal design for learning? Is it culturally responsive, teaching? What is it? Because it's not really there are some teachers who are doing some great things, but it needs to be everybody doing really good things. Okay, so my job is to bridge the gap, but I'm going to make sure that the people understand where they need to spend. And it's not really spending more money, it's spending time focused on that. And part of that is that this year's plan was to really kickstart multiple tiered system of success. So that's a piece of it. But when I walk around, I should be able to go from one classroom to the next and see similarities in the instructional practice. And that's not uncommon if you haven't done that work. But they could easily get there with the right sort of emphasis and teamwork, working in teams as professional learning communities to do that work. I fully believe it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Sure. So can you talk, Marlboro is a very diverse community, as you were just touching on. What kind of strategies would you bring to our community to engage our immigrant communities, parents, families in the education process?
Yeah. Well, obviously, we need to communicate them, with them in their home language. And I know that there is an app. I'm not quite and talking points is another piece. I don't quite know how all of those work, but ensuring that we're doing that consistently, doing that proactively. The other piece is learning where the community centers are. So, if there is a church or another community group that is working, visiting those, having an open house, having our EL teachers go there. The other thing that we did in Norwood is that we started an adult language class for adult language learners. That caused huge collaboration there. And actually, we had some of our older students who were EL students come and help teach, these parents. And that does several things. Those sorts of activities do several things. First of all, it builds a sense of community. It opens lines of communication, and it lets them know that we care enough to do that work and to be there. Yeah, so those are the things. The other piece of it is helping our EL population, parents and guardians, understand what they can do to help their kids. And usually there's a little bit more of a disconnect because they don't speak the language, but they can encourage their children to do certain things at home to do that. So those are the things that I would suggest and have done.
Thank you.
I just have a quick follow-up to what Dan was saying. You're leaving one place. I get that why it's...
Dan is going, so I'm having a really hard time.
He was talked about you're leaving Mashpee. It's an interim situation. I get that. Why did you leave Norwood?
It was time. So there was a change, in the school committee, and it was time. We were not aligned. So as sad as that is, the average life of a superintendent, I think, is about 2.5 years. So I did 3 superintendent lives. That's a pretty long stint. Still have friends there. Still care about what goes on there. But there does come to a time when it's time to hear a new voice, and that's kind of a natural evolution.
Okay. What is your view of the role of superintendent with the chief financial officer in the school and the city? How would you build a budget monitor the district's finances and develop a good reporting system.
Yeah, so those have got to be very close relationships, and they also have to be very transparent, honest relationships. So like I said earlier, I'm going to be meeting with the Director of Finance weekly for updates. Something goes, we don't have to wait till Wednesday to talk about something if there's something urgent. Ensuring that, all of our numbers are lining up between the schools and the town. If there is something that is, a problem, and I'll give an example. So a couple of years ago, and it was after April 1st, so we didn't have to bear the burden, but we had 4 students who moved into the district who were in out-of-district full-time residential placements. That was $250 apiece. That was $1 million in out-of-district increase. So as soon as we learned that was coming on our budget radar the next year, we learned that in June, that was communicated to the town manager, the town director of finance, and the finance committee of the town, because that's a big problem. That's a big swing. And then worked with them on how we would address that going forward. Actually, and again, it doesn't do any good to wait till January to have that conversation. Let's have that conversation as soon as we suspect that we might have a difficulty. So we did that. Ultimately, what happened is that 2 of the families moved again, and one ended up aging out. We were off on that, or they thought they had 1 more year. I'm not quite sure how that happened, I remember. And then one stayed. But what we did was working with the finance committee, we actually built a special education stabilization fund. Okay, and if we had money left over at the end of the year, we would put it into there, and it had to have a vote of the school committee and the Board of Selectmen to pull out of there. But that was a safety net in case that ever happened again. And that came from those conversations going on and planning for what could possibly happen in the future. So, and we did have to dip into it the last year to cover some costs. So.
Yes, anything else?
Yeah, if I can ask.
Let's go.
Okay, thank you. Here in Marlboro, we've had some folks focusing in on learning about TNTP, the new teacher project.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just interested, have you had experience in that? Any exposure? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have not. So, and again, I'm just going to take a little. I'll come back, but I firmly believe that if I'm expecting my principals and my teachers and my paras to continue learning, that I should be modeling that. This year, what I did was I applied for a fellowship with Leading Now. I won the fellowship, or was awarded the fellowship, so I'm part of that cohort for this year. They have a relationship with the New Teachers Project. So, and it's funny because I had looked at some of their work probably about 5 or 6 years ago, but then we had a workshop, a webinar in November maybe about transformative schools, which actually brought together a lot of the things that I had done. It's a very good organization that really brings together a lot of good research. From my previous experience and this experience. I don't know at this point in time exactly what PD they have done here with you folks, but it is a reputable national organization that has done some really good work around teaching practices. So,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would love to learn more.
Can you expand more on your fellowship? Expand more on that fellowship?
Yeah,
that you
so
just
Leading Now is a national organization that is funded from donors, and they basically accept applications from across the country, put together a cohort of about 25 people from across the country, and then do so there's basically 3 parts. One is a learning series kicked off with a cohort meeting in Tennessee, and then and then we meet once a month and do like a 2-hour webinar on, and the purpose is to build leadership, adaptive leadership skills, communication skills. What time is it? It's close to my bedtime. I forgot the last one. But it's working on those skills to develop high quality district leaders. So you go through this, and then the other part of it is some executive coaching, which you get to personalize on things that you want to work with. I start that. Actually, I was supposed to meet with my coach today, but I moved it to next week. I was busy doing something today, and then the third, and then that cohort, your relationship continues with Leading Now, and they have monthly workshops and things that they offer that are a little bit shorter to make sure that past cohort people are still part of, and being exposed to research going forward. So I'm part of that as a vigorous, ongoing learner. So the other piece of it right now, which is that there are opportunities for, communications people, the executive assistant to the superintendent, and the finance and budget people to also get involved with some groups going forward. So there's definitely, so they're trying to build the whole organization up and do it in a national way.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that's all the questions, correct? Any final thoughts?
Any final thoughts? Yeah. I think it's, so my, core values are really about ensuring that everybody has, a pathway and, an exit strategy, if you will, so that kids are prepared for their future. There's a lot of really great things going on here with, early college, the career pathways. I had built them working with the high school principal in Norwood, and I firmly believe that there are opportunities to expand that and really serve this population of kids. When I arrived in Norwood, and again, a lot of first-generation immigrant folks in Norwood who, if those kids go to college, it would be the first from their family to go. And I said, we need to prepare them to go. We need to have them to be able to leave our high school and do something more than just work at a Burger King or McDonald's. Not that that's terrible, but it's not a good way to support yourself. And maybe go to college or become a trade. We continually worked on that to create those pathways. I think it's really important in this context as well to ensure that these kids have a place to go to support themselves and become excellent citizens here in Marlborough. That's going to be important going forward. This is kind of a dream come true, to be able to come back to your hometown, to invest time and effort and bring your expertise to try to improve something that was important to you growing up. And it would be an honor to serve with you. So.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meet you in person sometime soon, hopefully.
Be safe traveling home.
Alrighty.
Yes, no worries. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can have it back. We will move on to the agenda for public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. Public comment. Is there any public comment going twice? Seeing none. Public comment. Is there any public comment for the third time? Seeing none. We will close public comments. We'll move on to item number 4, discussions regarding the school committee vote for new superintendent. So we will open up the floor to start the discussions. Anyone would like to take the lead? No? Someone's got to jump in.
Sure, why not? I'll take a lead.
Sure.
First, I'd like to say it was a pleasure having an opportunity to meet and speak with both David and David. David, whatever. And I appreciate having the time to be a part of the initial search group and then being able to see them both in district today. I'm quite appreciative of everyone's time within district and in the community to be able to have our staff being able to interact with them throughout the day, because obviously it takes all of us to make a decision. So thank you to everyone taking the time to attend, say hello in the hallway, and those especially that reached out through the exit interview tickets, which it's helpful because we need to have that insight, because we only have our own perspective to bring to the table. And those exit tickets, body language, conversations that we can see happening throughout the day definitely help. So thank you.
Okay. Anyone else like to add to the discussion? Yes, Mr.
Well,
Dan.
for thanking people, I'd like to thank Mrs. Ryan and excuse me, Ms. Brown for leading us down the right path on this and keeping us in the straight line we needed to go in to get to the point we're at. It was, again, I would say a great pleasure to look at people, the same people from 3 different aspects. Our original looking at them in our committee, looking at them, working and talking to staff members today, and seeing them here. It's a unique perspective that we were lucky to have, the 3 of us, at least from the school committee. I want to thank the teachers and parents also that were involved. They were definitely in there to do a job and to do it right. And their questions were excellent, and I wish I had thought of some of their questions. I'm been away from being an educator long enough to have forgotten some of those things. But it was a real pleasure, and I want to thank Ms. Brown and Ms. Ryan for helping us get through this the way we have.
Okay. I think we thanked everyone, so we need to get to the nitty-gritty. So, yes, Mr. Earl.
I will say, I know it's a long day for them,
It was.
but I think it's a good thing, because I think with both candidates, if I only had the short time of each one that I like, say the initial, just watching them in the little theater, I have different opinions than having this lengthy.
Could you speak up a little bit, because
Just having this lengthy process for them. I know it stinks for them, but I think it's good for us to see that, to have longer interactions with them to make a decision. Because if I was to just have the shorter time with each of them, I might have a different opinion, because my opinions have been back and forth the whole time.
But I also think this is the day in the life of a superintendent as well. You know, you're going from one thing to another, to another, to another. So it's good practice. I mean, they obviously know what the life is like a superintendent, but at least they got to see what it's like here in Marlborough. So, and who showed up and who didn't. But yeah.
I was just going to say, I think we have 2 really great candidates. I think they're very different from each other. I got a brief look at some of the exit tickets, and it seems a little divided.
It does.
I think coming into it, I thought that it was going to be a little more one-sided, and I'm feeling a little torn. And I kind of would like to revisit with the exit tickets again and relook at the comments and the data. I don't know if the committee is ready to make a decision this evening, if we need to take a little more time to look at the feedback, and maybe we can even collect more feedback from anybody in the community who maybe has seen the interviews tonight,
yeah.
that they should know that they can email the whole committee or something, and so that we get more feedback, more opinion. I don't know how we're going to decide. I feel like it's really a tough decision.
What kind of timetable are we on?
So I can share that. So ideally, we would like the next school committee meeting is on Tuesday. I also think that it's fair to let the candidates know by then. I don't feel comfortable, I expressed this earlier, that I don't feel comfortable voting tonight. It was a lot of information. It was a very long day. We reviewed the tickets, but it was very quick before the candidates got here. So I would feel comfortable voting on Tuesday. But again, we are a committee and need to act like one. So I am open to suggestions, but ideally, I think we can't prolong it any further than Tuesday. Again, I don't think it's fair for us, the community, and most importantly, the candidates as well. So that's my takeaway. Yes, Ms. Henson.
I appreciate having a little bit of time here to be able to really think through the day. I had tried to come into this day not with having a perspective, because I really wanted to try and take a fresh look at both candidates. And similar to, I think, as Ms. Ryan just indicated, I'm feeling a little conflicted and different things that I've taken in throughout the day. Maybe some different comments that have come from one time in the day to later on in the day. And I really feel like I need to weigh that. And I would really value having members of the community, whether that be staff or community members, parents, that maybe took the time either to come and attend something today or spent time watching tonight. I'd really love to hear from them because I do feel like they're just differences of opinions, and every opinion really does matter, but we do need to fall on, one side or the other. So if we could move a vote till Tuesday, I would really appreciate that little bit of extra time to make sure I'm thorough on where I'm sitting.
Sure. I would agree. I just don't. This is a big decision, and I think to be able to sleep on it for a night or two, I think is needed, at least from my perspective. So this is going to shape the community for years to come. So we need to do this right.
Not tomorrow.
So
I would like to then make a motion to table the vote until next Tuesday's meeting.
So it will be the 11th, if my math is correct.
Right? Third,
Plus
fourth, 11th, yes, the
11th.
11th.
Okay. So there's a motion on the table and seconded. Any further discussion regarding the candidates or thought process regarding this before we vote to table the vote until Tuesday, the 11th?
Can I just ask, before we would, go further on it, would that be something that we would then ask Patty Brown to make contact with both candidates to let them know that we are going to we've tabled if that's the case, and that we'd be moving to have a vote then next Tuesday, so that way they at least have an awareness of where we are in the process, just so we can build expectations correctly.
Sure. And I would encourage everyone that's watching at home, please give us your perspective on how tonight went. Your input is valued and appreciated and needs to be heard. So I would encourage you all to please do so, if you're still watching. It's been a long meeting. So having said that, there's a motion, seconded. Any further questions, comments, concerns? Ms. Michelle, I know you're good?
I am good.
We'll need a roll call vote, so we'll start with you.
Yes.
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 Okay, it is confirmed. We will table this to our next meeting. And that sums up the meeting. So, favorite
Motion
part.
to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn is on the table in second. Questions, comments, concerns about adjourning at 9 o'clock
on the nose.
even. Seeing none, Miss Michelle, lead us off.
Yes.
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 Okay, well, we adjourned at 9:01. All right, thank you, everyone.